Some stories are bigger than records, bigger than stats, bigger than the game itself. This is one of those stories. Before the packed stadiums, before the no-hitter, before he proved the doubters wrong at every level, he was a Michigan man. Jim Abbott didn't just pitch at the highest level of Major League Baseball. He redefined what was possible with one hand, with relentless belief, with a standard that had nothing to do with limitations and everything to do with preparation, courage, and heart. Today, we sit down with a legend, a former University of Michigan baseball star, an MLB icon, and a man whose story continues to inspire athletes far beyond the mound. This is a Hail Media original. Welcome to our conversation with Jim Abbott.
Hey everybody, welcome to Hail Media. I'm your host today, Doug Cohen, and I am joined on this Hail Media Originals episode by a Michigan legend, one of the greatest stories of all time in the sport of baseball, in Michigan athletics lore, Mr. Jim Abbott. Jim, I really appreciate you joining us today on Hail Media. How's it going?
It's going great, Doug. Thank you. It's fantastic to join you. Looking forward to it.
I really appreciate it. You know, a lot of people obviously know your whole story. You've inspired a lot of people with your story, how you've overcome obstacles to accomplish all the things you have, the no-hitter you threw in the majors. We're going to get to some of that stuff, but let's start off by, why don't you just tell us, what does life look like today for Jim Abbott? What are you up to? What are you doing?
Well, I spend my time between two places, really. I spend my time in Southern California. I started my baseball career out here with the Angels and met my wife and raised a family out here. But then I spend a lot of time in Northern Michigan still. I grew up in Flint, and my parents always dreamed of a place in Northern Michigan. So we go out there for a decent portion of the year. So between the two, it's a pretty fantastic way to spend time, and very close with, my family. I'm doing some motivational speaking around the country, which has been something that my public speaking teacher at the University of Michigan would never believe that I would go into that field. But it's worked out great. And, I've been very, very lucky. I'm living a life that is very fulfilling and very happy.
That's fantastic. You know, it's funny that you mentioned your public speaking teacher. When I was a freshman, I took public speaking up at the Freeze building, which was not spelled like the word freeze, but we always said you froze your butt off walking to it from South Quad, which is why they called it the Freeze building.
Yes.
And that's where my public speaking class was, and it was filled with athletes. Like, there were 3 of us football players in there. Malvia Washington was in that class, who ended up going to the finals of Wimbledon. The Brad Darr, the pole vaulter, Josie Charvet, the field hockey player. Like, everyone was in that class.
I bet.
That's funny. And let me ask you this too. So out in California, and as you go around the country, do you have to, because people from Michigan get it, but do you have to explain what up north is to people? Like, I'm going up north.
Well, if I do, I don't worry about it too much, because if they don't know, I don't want them to know. Every time, it seems like the last several years, every magazine, travel magazine or food magazine, has come out with an article about how great Northern Michigan is. And I tell people, don't worry about it. It's not that great. You don't have to go. It's
right.
it's too hard to get there.
Yeah.
We have to keep it
quiet.
We have to keep it quiet. But it is a very special place. It's probably my favorite place in the world. It's been special for our family, and my parents relocated up there. And so it's a way to stay connected to the state, and really spend a lot of special time up there in the summer months.
That's fantastic. I feel like when you drive up, well, once again, we don't want to we want to downplay it, I guess, a little bit, but I guess what I was going to say is, when you drive up there, you just kind of, you hit a certain spot as you're driving, and your fears just kind of, your not your fears, your worries just kind of leave. They start to fall away behind you as you're.
It's so true.
Upstate.
It's so true, and it's weird. when I'm in California or my family, I wake up in the middle of the night every night. It's 2 or 3 in the morning, whatever, and I just stare at the ceiling for a while before I fall back asleep. Northern Michigan, sleep through the night, like
Yep.
painfully sleep, like solid, 8 hours of sleep. You wake up, you're almost sore because it doesn't feel like you ever moved throughout the night. So I don't know what it is up there, but it's pretty special.
Yep, that is the truth. So here's a question. My dad grew up on Long Island, and he spent a good chunk of his youth at Ebbets Field, and ended up playing college football. All 3 of his sons, me and both my brothers, played college football, and yet, may he rest in peace, I think if you had to ask him, I think baseball was still his first love, even though he played football and his sons all played football. Was the Abbott home growing up, was it a football family or a baseball family? And people might wonder why I'm asking, but you were a football player too. You were a heck of a quarterback. So what was the dominant kind of fandom or focus, or was it just equal parts football and baseball?
That's a good question, Doug. I grew up in Flint, which is, where did you grow up in New York?
No, so my brothers were born in Far Rockaway in New York, but I was born in Detroit. They moved here before I was born, and I grew up in Farmington Hills.
Okay.
So,
So you're familiar. I grew up in Flint,
yeah.
the home of the great Glenn Rice. Glenn Rice and I played junior high school basketball every day together, and that was our gym class. Basically, they threw out basketballs, but
Wow.
it was a town of sports. And there were great athletes there. Glenn being one of them. Andre Rison would be another name that a lot of people would recognize.
Sure.
So it wasn't particularly one. My dad loved sports. He was a good high school player. He was a football player. He ran track. He played basketball. He wasn't a baseball player at all. Matter of fact, he went to high school with a guy named Paul Stroba, who would play on the '69 University of Michigan team that's so famous for beating Ohio State and having that wonderful year. But my dad loved sports, and he was a great guy. He didn't have a jealous bone in his body. He celebrated people, and he celebrated the Flint sports legends. So I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but that is to say, it wasn't a baseball household, so to speak. It was everything.
Yeah.
In the winter, you went to the gym and you played hoops, and in the fall you played football, and in the spring you played baseball.
It's awesome. And I was thinking about this too, thinking about Flint. My thought was, if you had to have a Mount Rushmore of Michigan Flint athletes, well, it would be Jim Abbott, Glenn Rice, Rick Leach, and I was trying to think who would the fourth be, because that way, right there, we've got baseball, basketball, and football covered, even though Rick was also a fantastic baseball player. Who would the fourth be? Because we've had a lot of people from Flint, but those 3 have to be on it.
Oh, well, Malavi Washington, I think, was we unfortunately, we'd probably have to start delving down into some of the Spartan history to talk about, the Flintstones and Mateen Cleaves and
Right.
all those guys. A lot of great athletes going way, way back too. Ken Morrow, who played ice hockey for the USA team. I could go on and on and on. But Rick, you mentioned Rick Leach. I was about 10 or 11 years old when Rick was at Michigan, and he was a left-hander. He went to Flint Southwestern. He was 3-sport all-state player. I can't overstate the place he held in my imagination. He was my hero growing up, and really was the one who cultivated my love for the University of Michigan.
Wow. That's awesome. The guts and glue of the maize and blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I was also going to ask you another Flint special is Angelo's Halo Burger or Big John's.
Absolutely. How do you know about that? Did you find your way up there at some point?
I actually did. So I worked in Flint for a year. I was my first sales management promotion when I was in telecom back in my corporate days. I was driving to Flint every day managing a team of sales reps, and I got schooled in all of those. And I don't think, I know Angelo's closed, unfortunately, after all those years.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be eating that stuff today. I try to be more healthy than
Yeah, I don't know how much of it's on the approved diet list, but those are great memories. Angelo's Coney Island was our very near the high school that I went to, Flint Central. It was our weekend hangout. It was literally the happy days kind of scenario. After you'd go someplace, you'd go to Angelo's and everything was $1. The famous story, chili dogs, their cheeseburgers were underrated if you ask me. But it was really holds a special place in my high school memories. And then Big John Steak and Onion, I'm still very guilty of driving between Detroit or Ann Arbor and heading up north and pulling off in town and getting a cheesesteak. That's just such an iconic place too.
It's hard not to do it, right? Corunna Road exit, I think. There's
that's right. That's right. Right there. Yeah. There's very hard not to get out and take a left.
That's right. That's right. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, let's you make it to Ann Arbor. And one thing I did a little research and you and I share 3 mutual teammates.
Really?
Greg McMurtry, Rick Hassel, and Mike Gillette, who all played baseball and were on rosters with you in the baseball program, who ended up being my teammates. Yeah, they were my teammates on the football team.
What years were you there?
So I got there in the fall of '88, right after you left.
Right after. Okay. All right. So yeah, you were right. Those are 3 characters right there. Hassel and Gillette, I would put as characters. Greg was an upright citizen.
Exactly.
Those guys, Greg McMurtry, I can only imagine what he was like on a football field, but when he walked into the baseball locker room and out on the field, just so physically gifted. He's one of the most physically gifted athletes I've ever witnessed. And I remember him launching balls, out into the building there beyond right field. He just, had all the tools. And Rick Hassel was a great athlete, 2-sport guy too. And Mike Gillette, he was a close friend. Well, so was Hassel. And, Mike, another athlete, he was a kicker, but he had that famous run back, as a punter, and he had a strong arm as a catcher, could hit, man. He, I think he's from down around St. Joe, and 3 excellent 2-sport athletes right there.
Yeah, right. And and McMurtry, to your point, what a fantastic. He was just such a fantastic athlete, and he didn't have much to say. He was a pretty soft-spoken guy.
No, he was the opposite of those other 2 guys.
Yeah, Hassel's a total character. And so Rick's older brother, Tom, played with my brother, Jeff, at Michigan as well. Because my brother, Jeff, played football at Michigan from 79 to 83. So you're right in between the 2 of us.
Yeah, great guys.
Yeah,
great guys. Good memories.
Yeah. So what I also want to ask you about that, speaking of, 2-sport athletes, I remembered hearing this in the past about how Bo had made the comment that you could have played quarterback for us. And I want to know, did you ever have those conversations with him directly? Did you have any interaction with Bo about that? And if you did the thought ever occur to you to walk down the parking lot to the old football building and show up? Was it ever still kind of unfinished business or in the back of your mind?
No, Bo, and for this generation or the last couple, at least, it's hard to describe the presence that he held in Ann Arbor and on the Michigan campus. It was just so prevalent everywhere, and he was around. He wasn't afraid to kind of pop into different places and everything. So he would come over to the baseball field, from the Michigan football indoor facility, and he would come over when games were going on, and he would look over the fence. And the famous story of him harassing Barry Larkin, telling him he picked the wrong sport, and I know that he wasn't overly generous sometimes in his praise, but he was with me, and I played high school football. I can't say that I ever truly understood the sport. I I loved playing. I loved Friday Night Lights. I loved the different culture. I had a fun little run in the Michigan State playoffs, but I went to Michigan probably 6'3" or 6'4", about 184 pounds. So I wasn't a football player. Baseball was my path. But I did love the interaction between the two sports, and him being around was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Is there any footage out there of your football run to the playoffs? Is there any? Did anybody ever post any online? Is there any way you can go to YouTube and watch Jim Abbott playing quarterback in Flint?
I think there is. I did an ESPN documentary last year called Southpaw that was fantastic. The feedback was terrific. We did some great screenings around the country, and ESPN has access to so many, different pieces of footage. So they went way back, and they did have some very cool footage of football and playing, for Coach Ufinger, who I did there at Flint Central. And, Doug, it was a great story. I'd never played football. It goes towards how different things are now, with these specialized sports, and you just stick to this and you do this. And we see some athletes that are doing other stuff. But, when I was in high school, I guess it was my sport. Pitching was my deal. Everything I thought about was around baseball. But my high school baseball coach, Bob Hollick, and then, the head coach, and we had a state championship caliber team. I can tell you a couple of guys on that team who went on and played D1, were a great team. And we went to the state semifinals. But they made me come out and play football, and I didn't know how to take a snap. I didn't know how to hand the ball off to the running back. I didn't know any of that stuff. And instead of just, go focus on long toss or working in the weight room or whatever, they encouraged me to do something that would be tough and to get in the locker room and to mix it up, and I'll always be thankful for that experience. I loved football and that culture, and it wasn't comfortable for me. I wasn't, didn't come naturally, but I will always be thankful that those coaches encouraged me to do that.
That's really cool. Well, and I'm curious. I mean, listen, you've never shied away from the fact that you have a disability that not everybody has the challenge of dealing with when it comes to either pitching, having to place your glove on your arm while you pitch and then switch. And when it comes to football, to me, my first thought is if you're taking a snap under center, it's so important to have both of your hands to take a snap under center. How did you do that? I mean, I'm just curious. Did you do more shotgun where they snapped it to you? I'm just curious how you did that.
That's funny. I don't think we were all under center. Our offense was under center. I think that was pretty much the way it was back then, unless you were Andre Rison over at Flint Northwestern, where they snapped it to you and you just decided what you were going to do with the ball
right.
afterwards. I don't even know that there were any plays. He just did what he wanted.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I had to learn how to take that snap, and I think it tells a great story of ingenuity, and not on my behalf, but on our coaches. They took time out. I'm sure there was discussions in that coaching room as I was making my way down to that field, like, how the hell are we going to make this work? And it was just trial and error, and getting my left hand underneath there and using my right hand below.
Yeah.
And I used my forearm, basically as a hand. And if it hit my left hand, I could clench down on it, and then I had it. And then the handoff to the running back, coming over here to my left, the orthodox way would be do it this way. The way Ricky Leach would have done it, even as a left-hander, would have been holding his right hand. But so I just kind of did a little backhand exchange, just grabbing the edge of the football, so to speak. So never caused a fumble. I was a punter. I actually think I might have been of all the things I ever did in life, punting might have been the best, but no one believed me. But I enjoyed it, and I'm proud to say that I mixed it up in that culture, and we had a great run. We beat a couple good teams in the state playoffs. Lost to Ann Arbor Pioneer state semifinals, 14-7. Would have gone to the Silverdome, and we had an extremely fast, talented offense. I believe if we'd have got to the AstroTurf in the Silverdome, we probably would have won the state. But Pioneer beat us 14-7.
Wow. Yeah, those stay with you, no doubt about it.
They do.
They stay with you. So let's talk a little bit more about. So I wanted to ask you about Bud Middaugh, about your manager at Michigan. And one thing I guess I didn't realize is, I didn't realize that Bud would have been a coach at Miami of Ohio for at least 2 years while Bo was the coach at Miami of Ohio. So, you always, everyone knows about the Cradle of Coaches and the Miami of Ohio football coaches that have gone on. I wonder if they had any kind of relationship there. And because I know Bo always used to joke about what a great pitcher he was. There's a photo of him, pitching. But they were there at Miami at the same time, and I never realized that if there was much of a connection there, or if Bud ever talked about that, or.
I think there was a connection to that, and I know that they had pride, in Miami of Ohio, and I believe at least on our baseball team, I think it was the case too with football. A decent proportion of our roster was made up from kids from that area, from Ohio kids, Cincinnati, a little bit of Cleveland, so Bud always maintained those ties down in Ohio. There was a great Connie Mack team down there in the Cincinnati area. Kind of a feeder for Moeller, I believe, Moeller High School. They were called the Miami Redskins. Can't say that anymore, but they had one of the better Connie Mack teams in the country. So there was great pride in the talent that was from down there, not only playing but coaching.
Well, and to that point, I mean, Bud had it rolling at Michigan. Is that right that Michigan finished in first place in the conference, at least outright or tied, every year that Bud was the manager at Michigan? I mean, that's what it looked like when I looked it up. That's crazy.
It could have been. That was the expectation.
Yeah.
Winning the Big Ten was the expectation for sure. You had great players. You had Barry Larkin, you had Hal Morris, Scott Kamenicki, Casey Close on down. They had been to the College World Series the year before I got there. Barry Larkin would have been a senior, but of course he was drafted. And so there was a lot of talent in that program. Fantastic resources. Bud and the Michigan Athletic Department made sure that you had the best of everything. You had great equipment, great facilities. And I was recruited around the country, mostly the Midwest, but I never fluctuated from the idea that once I went down, took a visit to Michigan with Bud and saw everything that they were doing with that program, that's where I would go to school.
Yeah. Well, and I took some pride for a long time in just saying that at one point, the fact that the Reds had 3 out of their 4 infielders were all Wolverines.
Yeah.
That to me was so cool with Sabo and Larkin and Hal Morris. Like I remembered that. Oddly enough, I grew up a Reds fan because they captured my imagination when I was a kid. George Foster and Johnny Bench and, that whole team, Concepcion. And like I said, my family wasn't originally from Detroit. I was born here, but they didn't automatically adopt Detroit as their home teams because they were New Yorkers. And so I wasn't raised to be a Tigers fan per se, even though I went to plenty of games at Tiger Stadium. I just, for whatever reason, I picked the Reds. And so for me, that was always a source of pride that I could say as a Wolverine that 3 of the 4 infielders were Wolverines on the Reds. But, that brings me to another thing, though, in that you mentioned Scott Kamenicki, and I didn't realize, I mean, I looked it up, and you and Scott were on the Yankees together at the same time.
Yeah, Cammy was great. He is great. I haven't talked to him in a little bit, but yeah, Scott was a senior out of Detroit, second round draft pick, very, very talented right-handed player. And he had some great moments at Michigan. He also had a couple injuries he had to battle through, and talk about grit and perseverance. He stuck with it, made his way to the major leagues, had a nice career. And yeah, we played in New York together on the Yankees, spent a lot of time on the Yankee bench together. And I knew Scott better in New York than I did, when we were, because he was a little bit older when I was a freshman, but uh, he was great. Tremendous sense of humor. Always, we laughed and gave each other a hard time. And one of my best friends on the Yankee team.
Did New York kind of pick up on that? I mean, there's a huge Michigan fan base in New York. I mean, there's always been a ton of New Yorkers to come out here to Michigan to attend the University of Michigan, and I know there's a big fan base in New York. Did they pick up on the fact that they had two Wolverines in the rotation, or in the pitching staff there? I mean, or did it kind of fly under the radar? Because to me, I would think that would be a story that people would be all fired up about in New York.
You know what, Doug? That's a good question. I don't remember anybody making a big deal about it at the time. The Yankee fandom, the Yankee mystique is so great that I think that's all they think about is just the Yankee part.
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody making a big deal about it, but it meant a lot to Scott and I, to be honest. We talked a lot about Michigan sports and, our common friends and our both being, growing up there. We also had Steve Howe actually on that team. And Hauser was a great Michigan pitcher and had an amazing career. One of the more talented left-handers you ever see. So, yeah, we had 3 Michigan guys on that team.
I did not realize
at
that.
one point. Yep.
Wow. I mean, that should have been. Yeah. I mean, I get it. The Yankee mystique, to your point, would overpower everything. It's the Yankees. But for the Michigan people in New York, I would think if they would have paid attention, that would have been something I would have been all over at the time. If I was a Yankee fan and I was a Michigan guy, I'd be shouting that from the rooftops.
That's right. There are a lot of New York connections, and there is everywhere. To tell you the truth, out here in LA, I mean, I don't live in LA. I live south of there, but it's amazing to me in the fall, getting on an airplane out here and not even necessarily traveling to Ann Arbor or Detroit. If there's a game, how many people have the paraphernalia on and they're ready to head back, and people making that pilgrimage back to the big house from all parts of the country, and it's an amazing alumni base to be a part of, isn't it? It's incredible.
It really is. You see it everywhere. You can see Michigan gear anywhere, really, in the world. You can find somebody wearing a Michigan hat, and you give them a little Go Blue and get a Go Blue back. It happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more. Just a couple of quick ones on Michigan before we move on to some other topics. I want to talk a little bit more about your major league career a little bit, and I want to talk about your own Wolverines, your daughters who are both Wolverines student athletes. They had careers at Michigan as well, which is amazing. So those are a few things I want to get to. But you mentioned the facilities and at Michigan, they made sure that you had the best of everything. I've always been curious a little bit about the travel in the spring when you got to get down south to prepare and play some games before the weather turns favorable enough to play games back in Ann Arbor. And what was that like? Like, what was the travel like? What are the differences between like when you played and how they approach that now?
It's a little bit better now. They've shortened up the season a little bit now, where they don't allow the warm weather schools to start quite as early as they used to and have such an advantage, right? So, but back then, we would be playing over in the indoor facility and at the football facility and throwing off of plastic mounds, hitting in batting cages, and then boom, Bud always made sure that we had a difficult schedule. So we would go down to Florida, we'd go down to Texas. I think my junior year, I went from throwing off of plastic pitching mound indoors to pitching against Texas in Austin. And that didn't go so well. I wasn't, it's just very surreal to be practicing indoors. We were doing all our conditioning, walking that icy walk, cold and sweaty, back from the football facility back to the baseball field, and changing, going home, and doing your homework or whatever. So it was, those were the challenges that a team from the North faced,
Right.
and then you'd go down and, I don't remember coming to California to play. But we played in Texas, we played in Florida, and soon enough it started to warm up. But there were several days over at the baseball field at the Wilpon complex over there that we definitely were shoveling snow off of the they didn't have AstroTurf, they didn't have the fake turf. We were shoveling snow and pulling the tarp off, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that program at that point.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Ooh, that doesn't sound like fun. Oh man. And then what about what was your toughest class at Michigan?
Oh my God. So I took a class, and I'll get this off my chest. I wish I'd have taken my studies more seriously than I did. Not that I didn't. I think I tried, but Michigan just has, and I tried to tell my daughters this, so many opportunities to go learn amazing things, so many resources, so much support and help that you really can get just a world-class education, but you got to get involved. You have to find it out and find out what things are appropriate and beneficial. And I kind of got caught up in trying to get by. My eggs were in, I don't know what I thought, because I don't think I thought I was going to be a major league player, but so I took a class called National Parks and Monuments, which sounded to me like an absolute blast, and it had a lab as part of it, so it filled a lot of requirements, and that was the hardest class I ever had in my life. I mean, you had to know rocks and formations from 13 different, eras of the world, and how it formed. And it was just unbelievably difficult class. I'm pretty sure I passed at least, but it wasn't the cakewalk that it sounded like when I put my finger on it in the syllabus.
That is so funny. I've heard a lot. I think there's a lot of stories like that. Like I've heard stories about guys that took astronomy thinking that it would be kind of fun. They'd learn about the planets, and it ended up being like the toughest class they ever took. Like,
my God.
I think a lot of guys, a lot of student athletes probably have a story like that at Michigan. Because to your point, you're trying to survive. Sometimes it's your schedule is crazy busy, especially during a season, and you're kind of looking for at least one class in your schedule that can kind of lighten the load. And so you take one that sounds like it might be easy, and it ends up being a huge curveball that takes you down. That's funny. So, and what was your favorite place to eat and your favorite place to hang out in Ann Arbor when you were there?
I love Pizza Bob's, still do. The Torpedo sub was my favorite, and the chocolate mint milkshake there. John Bacon still is a friend, and he sends me pictures every now and then of he and his son out front of that place. So, I love that. Mr. Spots was brand new place when I was there, and that was fun. I guess it doesn't land too far away from my roots of Angelo's and
right,
the Big John steak and onion. As far as hangouts, we used to go to what's now Scorekeepers, was Dooley's at the time.
it was Dooley's. Yep.
We spent a lot of time there and Rick's, and just all over that campus. It struck me whenever it was $2 pitcher night or something that we'd be out and about. And I went back a few years ago, and I was sitting in one of the places that's a little more upscale. I think it might have been Charlie's. And I ordered a drink, and it came to me, and it, after living in New York, living in California, everything, I was actually kind of struck, like, all right, well, this is actually a reasonable price for a cocktail. And And then I thought back, I said, I wouldn't come here in college because it was too expensive. I didn't have enough money to go out and do this kind of thing. So, we got around campus quite a bit. It was fun. And, since didn't spend a lot of time on Main Street.
Right.
But now going back, I love those places as well.
After you leave Michigan, you left after your junior year, correct? After your third year there?
Yes.
And you went to Seoul and pitched a complete game to get the gold against Japan, which had to be an unbelievable experience. Had you seen the world much outside of the country when you had made that trip?
No, not at all. I had played, after my sophomore year, I had talked it over with Coach Middaugh, and I was going to go out to the Cape and play that way at the time. And Cape Cod was the number one, if one or two, 1A college baseball destination in the summertime. I was all signed up. I was anxious to do that. And then I was invited to play on the USA team. So I played in the Pan Am games on the Pan Am team. And after my sophomore year, and we traveled to Cuba. We went around mostly in that area of the world. So that was my first real foreign, baseball experience with even, playing in Cuba, as a college sophomore, 50,000 people in the stands, Fidel Castro.
Wow.
It was just an amazingly eye-opening experience, so far beyond playing, in the Big Ten or playing college baseball. It was this moment of representing your country.
Yeah.
And then we played in the Pan Am games. And then after that, that was a little bit of a setup team for the following summer. They wanted to try to cultivate the same chemistry and the same guys to come back, go play college baseball again, and then come back, and we're going to play on the Olympic team, and we'll go to Seoul together. So that was sort of the progression, and then I went and played for the USA team, and then we traveled all around the world, Italy and Japan and Korea, and got an experience for foreign baseball and how much the game is loved around the world.
Wow. I did not realize that progression from the Pan Am Games to the Olympics, and that makes a lot of sense because I think, it just seems like that's always kind of the challenge for a national team is to try to get them to be cohesive and get time together to develop and become a team.
Yeah, I could go on and on. We had it was the culture on those teams was the best I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
It was amateur baseball, so every player on that team was a college player. They were, and it was guys that I had heard of around the country. Robin Ventura from Oklahoma State, or Tino Martinez from Tampa. Our head coach was from my sophomore year was from Miami. Our second year was Stanford, LSU. We met up in Tennessee in these barracks, and that's where our training grounds were. And it was all these college guys that you'd heard about, all of a sudden we're all living in these Army barracks and trying to make this team and then go out and face amazing competition. It's hard to describe how good the Cubans were. None of those guys were coming to the big leagues at that point. So, they were 28, 29, 30, some cases 30 years old, swinging aluminum bats. So I loved playing in Michigan, and it gave me the confidence to walk into that arena. But really the formative years of my confidence and the idea that I might be able to play at the next levels was with the USA team.
Wow. That's fascinating stuff because, to your point, in terms of you having the confidence to go to the next level, you had an accelerated path at the next level. You won your first start in 1989, right? With the Angels. Like, it didn't take you very long to get right into the majors and make an impact like immediately. So that makes a lot of sense. That you had that interlude between Michigan and the majors to be able to get yourself prepped and ready. That makes a lot of sense. Wow.
Absolutely.
So you get to the majors and you start out in LA. And I guess one of the things I want to ask you about, because you played in LA, you played in New York, you played in Chicago. Those are the three biggest markets where the lights are shining the brightest
Mm-hmm.
on the teams there in terms of the press and the media. And you ended up playing in Milwaukee as well, which is a smaller market. So I'd just be curious to know, not everybody that goes to the league has the experience of playing in those three markets. I mean, that's got to be a rarity to spend time in LA, New York, and Chicago. Did you
Yeah.
find that, the media, because of just how big the market was more of a challenge to kind of deal with, or did you never really allow that to impact you? And was Milwaukee any different in that regard, just in terms of the
Sure.
size?
Well, I started with the Angels. I spent 4 years with the Angels. They were my team. I was drafted by them. Um, and I started, my career was on a good trajectory, and I was traded, from the Angels to the Yankees, which is a jarring thing. I wanted to be Alan Trammell. I wanted to be Lou Whitaker, spend my whole career with one team, and that
Wow.
wasn't to be. And for good and bad reasons. And maybe it was kind of meant to be. My dad had thoughts about that, but um, then I went to New York, I've ever since then I've been fascinated by how different the experience can be. Everyone, you're playing in the major leagues, you're playing on the same fields, you're playing against the same players, but when you go home at night, it's a different thing. You're living on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, or,
Yeah.
you're living in the suburbs of Milwaukee. Robin Yount and Derek Jeter, two Hall of Famers, two guys who I think maybe statistics you could take a peek at, had completely different experiences in their time in the game. And so I was very lucky. If I wasn't to spend time with one team, which would have been what I always hoped to do. To have played in New York, I wouldn't trade that for a second. Just a different, exhilarating, amazing feeling. And then Chicago, I loved because it was the Midwest. It was a place I felt comfortable in. I liked Milwaukee a lot as well. I love Lake Michigan. I still do. I still, places up on Lake Michigan, but um, you seem to like the places where you pitch well the most.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
and that's an unavoidable truth. So, um, I'm really happy, and I thank you for bringing that up because I saw the game from a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah. Well, that was something interesting to me to think about, and the fact that you had your no hitter in the biggest city, in the biggest market. That's I mean, that's an angle that I don't listen. I think probably a lot that could be said about your no hitter has been said. I mean, you wrote a book about it. And it was one of those moments that it's an iconic moment, obviously, in sports history. But I thought about the New York experience, and having had roots in New York, and my daughter having lived in New York for the last 4 years, and just thinking about, like, being in that city and being the toast of that town. Had to just
Yeah, yeah.
be insane, because we could talk about the game itself, and and I know that you had a rough out, the game before that one, and then you came back and
Mhm.
and pitched a no-hitter, which is incredible, all the things that everybody knows about the no-hitter. But that experience of being in New York and doing that, it's just that's an insane context, I would think, to be able to deal with. Was that part of it at any point? Because you still had a season, you still had to keep pitching. It wasn't like you reached the top of the mountain with a no hitter and you ride off into the
Yeah.
sunset. You had to keep going. And was it overwhelming to be in New York and be on the Yankees and have that happen to you and then have to follow it up?
Yeah, that's a great point. It just shows you life can change. What happened last week doesn't happen this week, because I certainly went into that game with a ton of uncertainty and maybe not the highest confidence that I've ever had, and your life changes. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right. And I took the cab to the ballpark. We lived the New York life. We lived on the Upper East Side. It wasn't that far to the Bronx. And the connection, the Yankee connection has been so unbelievable, really. The connection to the city, the sports fans there, walking down the street, people still, remember that date, they yell across the street, and the Yankees, like I said, I did the ESPN E60 last summer that came out and went back to New York, and they were so accommodating. The Yankees were so accommodating and so positive about promoting that and having me back throughout the first pitch. Once a Yankee, always a Yankee. That's a true story. That is a true story. And you can say what you want about New York. It's not always an easy place, and I certainly wasn't a Hall of Fame pitcher when I was there. But to have your name on that wall, to have your name in those books means a lot.
That's incredible. It's definitely something that, I think a lot of people are still in awe of. And the fact that you overcame an obstacle that most people don't have to deal with trying to overcome in doing it is just it's really a great thing that, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but the fact that you're able to take that and use it to inspire and give speeches around the country and touch so many people, is just so fantastic. And as a Michigan grad, as a Wolverine, definitely makes me proud to have you representing us in that way. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about that as a Wolverine, I have a daughter who went to Michigan, and I know the first time I drove up to Ann Arbor as a dad, after having spent years in Ann Arbor and many trips to Ann Arbor, the first time I drove up there as a dad was different than every other time. It was like a whole brand new experience the first time I set foot on campus as a dad. And you've had two daughters compete at Michigan. Maddie was a captain on the volleyball team. Ella was a water polo athlete who was academic all Big Ten. I mean, they had great experiences there. I'm assuming they accomplished a lot there. What was that like to kind of have a second go round at Michigan as a dad of a couple of student athletes there? I'd love to hear that experience.
Well, I had the same feeling as you did, Doug, driving up there. It's like it's this mix of emotions, this flood of memories that comes back to you as they're checking into West Quad in the same way that you did, so many years before, and seeing both of them, one in the pool, the other in the gym. I'll never forget my oldest daughter running out there because there was an injury that unfortunately, but fortunately for her, allowed her into the game. She wasn't projected to play a lot her freshman year, and all of a sudden she was in the first game of the year, and just watching her run out there with those colors on and that jersey was one of the proudest moments of my wife and I's life. And everyone says it. My daughter's looked at a lot of different schools, and I don't know why. I guess because it's so hard to get into Michigan now. It's just a different thing. It's so many kids out here in California want to go to Michigan. It's unbelievable.
That's crazy.
It's a real badge of honor, and people want to make that journey. And my daughters were no different. And the fact that they competed there, they graduated from there, that they have the pride in the school that they do. And we watch games together. We text together. It's just this affiliation, this bond that is lifelong. And it's one of the happiest aspects of my life is that relationship.
That's awesome. I mean, give us a little, let's talk about each of them individually just for a minute. Let's talk about Maddie's career as a volleyball player at Michigan. How did that go? What were some of her highlights, high points? Because I know she played all 4 years and it looks like she accomplished a lot, especially as a captain.
Yeah, I'm so proud of her. She went to a very small private school out here in California, but who had an amazing volleyball run. She played with her best friend ended up playing at Stanford. Another great player on that team went on to play at Loyola Marymount. And Maddie was a great athlete. She'll tell you that Big Ten volleyball for her was probably wow, that it was going to be a leap. But the program, Mark and Lisa Rosen, and at the time, Aaron Virtue, who's now the head coach at Michigan, they had a need for a setter. And Maddie was still looking around, and they said, we think there's a spot. And wow, it was overwhelming. It was like Big Ten, the best college volleyball conference in the world.
Yeah.
And she went and she played and she contributed and became a captain. Just so proud of her, that she had an impact on that program, and because of the person who she is as much as the athlete who she is. And then my youngest daughter, Ella, played a very tough sport, water polo, which is big out here. She jumped in that pool. That is the most demanding physical sport you can imagine, the discipline that it takes, the early morning practices, the cold, and the fact that she played at Michigan and played with those girls and competed at that level. Like I said, I would wipe away anything I ever did sports wise just to have seen that. And,
isn't that awesome? And
it's just really
water
special.
polo is physical as can be. I mean, it's a battle in the pool, is it not?
Oh, it's brutal. It's just brutal. And you have the hand fighting and you have the wrestling in the water, which imagine, her team scrimmaged her high school football team in water polo in the pool, the men's football team. And these guys were dying. They were trying to fight their way to the edge of the pool just to hang on. But then you have the demands of swimming, back and forth. And then a shot will be blocked and you got to turn around and go. And then you got to turn around and go. So, she retired from the sport, and I don't think she's been back in the pool since. She's in very good shape, but she said, I'd had enough of the water for a while, Dad.
That's wild. Well, and you talk about, the whole multi-sport idea. You're a baseball pitcher. Your wife played hoops, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But neither of your daughters played softball or basketball. They went water polo and volleyball. Like, what did the two of you know about water polo or volleyball?
I don't think that's a coincidence. Yeah, I think it was terrible coaching in each sport that might have pushed them away. Because my wife did coach a little basketball and I coached softball, but they had a nice broad range of experiences, and I would encourage parents out there, that throwing motion is big, get out there and play catch with your kids, boys, girls, whatever. Both of my girls played softball, and they didn't go on to keep playing, but the throwing motion helped my oldest daughter in terms of, serving. She became a very good volleyball server.
Yeah. And
my youngest daughter was very accurate in the pool. She could throw the ball, what they call dry pass, where the other girl catches it without it hitting the water. And I remember sitting up in the stands with Jim Harbaugh, and he was like, "Oh, they're so accurate. You see that? They throw the ball right to each other." And I was like, "Yeah, it's called a dry pass." And he was just fascinated by, it's a dry pass. He was telling his dad, it's called a dry pass. So encourage that throwing motion, play catch with your kids. It's just great time spent, and it can have other benefits besides just baseball or softball.
Absolutely. There's no better way to bond. Well, that's a great message. I mean, that's about as good of a note, I think, as we could end it on as you could ask for. Because I've really enjoyed this. This has been a great conversation. You've been really generous with your time, Jim. I really appreciate you. And I'm just really happy that I had a chance to meet you and talk through some of these memories. As Wolverine to Wolverine, our followers and our listeners will enjoy this a lot on Hail Media too. So thanks again. Thanks for everything that you've done as a Wolverine representing us. And that's about all I've got. Go Blue.
Thanks, Doug. I enjoyed it too. Like I said, I'm so proud of Michigan and being able to connect with so many great people around the country, around the world, like you said, and go Blue. Let's just keep trying to make good things happen, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Jim.
My pleasure.
If you like this kind of content, please like, share, follow, and subscribe. And as always, go Blue.